The galaxy was vast, endless, and full of mysteries. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the stars with wonder and dreamed of exploring the unknown. They built ships, sent out probes, and ventured farther than anyone thought possible. But one day, everything changed. A ship called the Eclipse, Earth's most ambitious deep space explorer, vanished without a trace. It was as if the universe had simply swallowed it whole. No signals, no wreckage, nothing. The people of Earth mourned its loss, and over time they stopped talking about it altogether. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted. Thousands of years later, when humanity had long since given up hope, the eclipse returned. It drifted silently into the territory of an ancient alien empire, its battered hull glowing faintly under distant suns. Sensors across countless civilizations lit up with alerts. The impossible had occurred. The lost Earth vessel was back, Commander. Daniel Carter stood in the cockpit of his small recovery shuttle, staring at the massive ship through the viewport. His hands rested lightly on the controls, but he didn't move. Beside him, Lieutenant Lavra Hayes leaned forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. The eclipse loomed ahead of them, its surface scarred by what looked like eons of travel through harsh environments, yet despite its condition it seemed alive. There was an eerie energy radiating from it, something neither of them could quite explain. "It's real," Lavra whispered, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "After all this time, it's actually here." Daniel nodded slowly, though his mind raced with questions. How had the eclipse survived so long? Where had it been? And why had it come back now? He glanced at the readouts on his console. The ship's systems were active, which meant someone or something was aboard, but there was no communication. No response to their hails. "Just silence. Let's go," Daniel said finally, his tone firm. "We need answers." The two of them suited up quickly, checking their equipment one last time before heading toward the airlock. As they approached the eclipse, the shuttle shuddered slightly, and Lavra gripped the armrest of her seat. "Did you feel that?" she asked. "Probably turbulence," Daniel replied, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Something about the eclipse felt off, unnatural even. When they docked and stepped onto the ship, the sensation only grew stronger. Every sound echoed unnaturally, as if the walls themselves were hollow. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, vanishing whenever they turned to look. "This place gives me the creeps," Lavra muttered, clutching her scanner tightly. She swept it around the corridor, but the readings were erratic, jumping between normal levels and spikes of energy that made no sense. "Stay focused," Daniel said, though his own nerves were beginning to fray. He led the way deeper into the ship, their footsteps ringing out in the oppressive silence. The corridors were dimly lit, the lights flickering sporadically. Dust coated every surface, yet somehow the air smelled fresh, as though the ship had been sealed away perfectly. They reached the bridge after what felt like hours. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a room frozen in time. Consoles lined the walls, their screens dark but intact. Chairs sat neatly in place, as if waiting for their occupants to return. In the center of the room was a large console, its surface glowing faintly. Daniel approached it cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is this?" Lavra asked, pointing to a single log entry displayed on the screen. The date stamp indicated it had been recorded thousands of years ago, yet the timestamp showed it had been created just hours earlier. The message was brief, cryptic. "We've seen things words cannot describe." Daniel stared at the words, his mind struggling to process them. What could the crew of the Eclipse have encountered out there in the void? He tapped the console, trying to access more logs, but the system responded sluggishly. Fragments of data scrolled across the screen, disjointed and incomplete. Images flashed by too quickly to make sense of a swirling vortex of colors, towering structures that defied physics, and shapes that seemed to shift and twist before his eyes. Lavra moved to another console, her fingers flying over the keys. "There's something here," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "I think I can pull up some audio recordings." A moment later, the room filled with static, followed by a voice. It was calm but strained, as if the speaker was fighting to stay composed. "This is Captain Jameson reporting from the eclipse. We've entered uncharted space beyond anything we've ever encountered. The laws of physics don't apply here. Time ... it doesn't flow the way it should. And then there are the entities, they're watching us." The recording cut off abruptly, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Lavra exchanged a glance with Daniel, her face pale. "Entities?" she repeated. "What does that mean?" Before Daniel could respond, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. Both of them froze, their breaths quickening. Then, as suddenly as it had gone out, the power came back on. The consoles hummed to life again, displaying new information. This time the messages were clearer, more urgent. "They showed us," one log read. "They showed us everything." "Who?" "Showed them what?" Lavra asked, her voice trembling. "And why does it feel like we're being watched?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned his attention to a map displayed on one of the screens. It showed the eclipse's trajectory, stretching far beyond any known region of space. At the end of the line was a cluster of coordinates marked with a symbol neither of them recognized. Whatever lay at those coordinates, it was clear the eclipse had gone somewhere no other ship had dared to venture. "We need to keep moving," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. "There's more to find here." As they left the bridge, the feeling of being watched intensified. Every shadow seemed to shift, every noise echoed louder than it should. Lavra kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive weight of the unknown pressing down on them. When they reached the crew quarters, they found personal belongings scattered about, untouched by time. Books lay open on bunks, clothes hung neatly in lockers, and meals sat half-eaten on trays. It was as if the crew had vanished mid-action, leaving everything behind. Lavra picked up a journal from one of the beds and flipped through it. The entry stopped abruptly, the final page smeared with ink as if the writer had been interrupted. "This doesn't make any sense," she said, shaking her head. How could an entire crew disappear like this? Daniel didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the eclipse held secrets far greater than they had imagined. Secrets that might change everything they thought they knew about the universe and perhaps even themselves. As they continued their exploration, strange occurrences began to plague them. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, and both humans reported vivid dreams filled with swirling colors and incomprehensible shapes. Lavra confided in Daniel late one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think whatever happened out there... it didn't just change them. It changed the ship too." Her words sent chills down his spine, but he couldn't deny the mounting evidence. Something about the eclipse defied logic, bending reality itself around its presence. And as much as they wanted to leave, neither of them could shake the feeling that they were meant to be there for better or worse. By the time they returned to the bridge, exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Little did they know, the answers they sought would lead them far beyond anything they could have imagined. News of the eclipse's return spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Across the galaxy, civilizations both young and ancient buzzed with speculation. The ship's reappearance was unlike anything anyone had ever seen a relic from Earth's distant past, carrying secrets that defied explanation. For the Galactic Council, a governing body composed of representatives from countless species, the situation was both thrilling and alarming. They convened an emergency meeting on Xylos Prime, a planet known for its neutral status and advanced communication systems. Ambassador Rachel Dawson stood at the edge of the council chamber, observing the chaos unfold. Delegates argued loudly, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of opinions. Some called for immediate action, demanding that the eclipse be brought under strict quarantine. Others insisted it should be studied openly, believing its return could unlock answers to questions humanity had long abandoned. Rachel, however, remained calm. She had spent decades navigating diplomatic crises And she knew better than to rush into decisions without careful consideration. "The eclipse is not just a ship," she said firmly, cutting through the noise. Her voice carried authority, silencing the room. "It represents something far greater, an event that could reshape our understanding of the universe. We must proceed with caution." Her words earned nods of agreement from some, but skepticism from others. A representative from the Zarnath Empire, a species renowned for their technological prowess, leaned forward in his seat. "Caution is a luxury we cannot afford," he said, his tone sharp. "If the eclipse holds knowledge or technology beyond our comprehension, we must secure it before it falls into the wrong hands." Rachel clenched her jaw but kept her composure. "Securing it is one thing, rushing in blindly is another. We don't know what happened to the crew or why the ship returned after all this time. Until we understand the risks, any attempt to seize control could endanger us all." The debate raged on, with no clear resolution in sight. As the meeting dragged into hours, Rachel retreated to a private office to gather her thoughts. She stared out the window at the sprawling city below, her mind racing. The eclipse was more than just a mystery, it was a test. How the galaxy responded would define their future, for better or worse. Meanwhile, aboard the eclipse, Daniel Carter and Lavra Hayes continued their investigation. The strange occurrences they had experienced only grew more frequent. Equipment failed without warning, forcing them to rely on manual overrides. Lights flickered unpredictably, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. And then there were the dreams, vivid, unsettling visions that left them waking in cold sweats. One night, as they sat together in the ship's mess hall, Lavra broke the silence. "Do you think we're losing our minds?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her face was pale, dark circles forming under her eyes. Daniel hesitated before answering. He had been asking himself the same question. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever's happening here, it's not normal. This ship ... it feels alive." Lavra nodded slowly, wrapping her arms around herself as if to ward off a chill. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those colors, the ones from the logs, and the shapes ... they're everywhere. Like they're trying to tell us something." Daniel reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "We'll figure it out," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed his own words. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it together." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden activation of a nearby console. Both of them jumped to their feet, startled. The screen displayed a map of the ship, highlighting a section they hadn't explored yet, a hidden chamber buried deep within the core. Without hesitation, they grabbed their gear and set off, their footsteps echoing through the deserted corridors. The journey to the chamber was fraught with tension. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the ship itself was resisting their intrusion. When they finally arrived, they found themselves standing before a massive door etched with intricate patterns. The designs pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum that resonated in their chests. "This isn't like anything else on the ship," Lavra said, her voice filled with awe. She ran her fingers over the surface, feeling the vibrations beneath her skin. "What do you think it is?" Daniel studied the door carefully, searching for a way to open it. After several minutes of trial and error, he pressed a sequence of symbols that seemed to align with the pulsing rhythm. With a deep groan, the door slid open, revealing a cavernous room bathed in soft golden light. At the center of the chamber stood a crystalline structure, towering and otherworldly. Its surface shimmered with iridescent hues, shifting constantly as if alive. The air around it crackled with energy, making the hairs on their arms stand on end. "What is that thing?" Lavra whispered, taking a cautious step forward. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with both wonder and unease. "But I think it's the source of everything, the malfunctions, the dreams, maybe even the crew's disappearance." As they approached the crystal, a wave of warmth washed over them, followed by a flood of images. They saw flashes of the eclipse's journey, the crew venturing into uncharted space, encountering beings of unimaginable power. These entities, referred to as the architects, radiated an aura of wisdom and authority. They revealed truths so profound that the human mind struggled to comprehend them. Reshaping the crew's perception of reality, Daniel stumbled back, clutching his head as the visions overwhelmed him. Lavra fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. "They showed them," she gasped, her voice trembling. "They showed them everything." When the visions subsided, they found themselves lying on the floor, breathless and disoriented. The crystal pulsed gently, as if acknowledging their presence. Daniel forced himself to sit up, his mind reeling from what he had seen. "We can't let anyone else near this," he said urgently, looking at Lavra, "not until we understand what it means." She nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. "If the wrong people find out about this, they'll tear it apart, or worse, they'll try to use it." Determined to protect the artifact, they sealed the chamber and returned to the bridge. There, they discovered a new message waiting for them on the main console. It was addressed to the Galactic Council, written in simple but haunting terms. "The architects have spoken. Their gift is not for the unworthy." Daniel and Lavra exchanged a glance, their expressions grim. They knew the message would ignite a storm of controversy when it reached the Council, but they also knew they couldn't stop it. The galaxy would soon learn of the architects and the truth they had entrusted to humanity. Back on Xylos Prime, Rachel Dawson received the transmission. With a mixture of dread and fascination, she read the message multiple times, each word sinking deeper into her consciousness. The implications were staggering. If the architects truly existed, they represented a force far beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. And if their gift was real, it could change the course of history, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that humanity wasn't ready. Not yet. The council debated endlessly, factions clashing over how best to handle the situation. Some argued for immediate retrieval of the artifact, while others urged restraint. Rachel fought tirelessly to delay action, knowing that haste could lead to disaster. As tensions escalated, reports began pouring in from across the galaxy. Sightings of unidentified ships near the eclipse's location raised alarms. It seemed other civilizations had taken notice, and they weren't willing to wait for the Council's decision. A coalition of powerful empires launched a fleet toward the eclipse. Intent on claiming the artifact for themselves, Daniel and Lavra monitored the incoming ships with growing anxiety. They knew they couldn't defend the eclipse against such overwhelming forces. Their only option was to prepare the ship for departure, a daunting task given its age and condition. Working together, they activated the eclipse's dormant systems, coaxing it back to life. The engines roared to life with a brilliance that blinded sensors light years away. The crystalline structure in the hidden chamber resonated with energy, enveloping the ship in a shimmering field that bent space itself. As the alien armada closed in, the eclipse vanished once more, leaving behind stunned observers and unanswered questions. Back on Xylos Prime, Rachel watched the live feed cut off, her heart heavy with both relief and dread. Whatever the architects had gifted humanity, it was clear they weren't ready to share it with the rest of the galaxy. Far beyond the reach of telescopes and sensors, the eclipse drifted silently through the void, carrying its secrets and its burden. It waited patiently, biding its time until Earth would call it home again, or until the architects deemed it time to reveal their purpose. The eclipse's sudden disappearance left the galaxy in stunned silence. The ship had vanished just as an armada of alien vessels approached, their intentions clear: to seize the crystalline artifact hidden within its core. For a moment, there was nothing but emptiness where the massive vessel had been. Then, slowly, the shock gave way to chaos. Speculation ran wild across communication networks. Some believed the eclipse had self-destructed rather than fall into enemy hands. Others thought it had been destroyed by the architects themselves, punishing humanity for failing to protect their gift. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The eclipse wasn't gone. It had simply left. Back on Xylos Prime, Ambassador Rachel Dawson sat alone in her quarters, staring at the blank screen of her console. She replayed the events over and over in her mind, searching for answers she couldn't find. What had Daniel Carter and Lavra Hayes seen aboard the ship? What secrets had they uncovered before vanishing with the eclipse? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She sighed, calling out for the visitor to enter. It was Commander Elena Voss, one of the Council's highest-ranking officers. She carried herself with quiet authority, her sharp features softened slightly by exhaustion. "Ambassador," she said, closing the door behind her, "we need to talk." Rachel gestured for her to sit. "What is it now?" she asked wearily. "Another faction demanding access to classified data? Another threat of retaliation because we didn't act fast? Enough?" Elena shook her head. "No, this is different." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "There are rumors spreading among the delegates, whispers about the architects. People are saying they're not just ancient beings, but creators. That they designed everything, the stars, the planets, even life itself." Rachel frowned. "That's impossible. Even if such beings existed, why would they reveal themselves now? And why to us?" "That's the question everyone's asking," Elena replied. "But here's the thing, some believe the architect's return means something bigger is coming, a shift in power. A reckoning, maybe." Rachel leaned back in, her chair rubbing her temples. "A reckoning for what? We don't even know who or what these architects are. All we have are fragments of logs and second-hand accounts from 2 humans who disappeared along with the eclipse." "Exactly," Elena said, leaning forward. "And that's why I'm here. The Council wants to send a team after the eclipse. Not to retrieve it this time, but to track it. To find out where it went and what happened to its crew." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious. After everything that's happened, you want to chase after a ship that defies logic? A ship carrying something powerful enough to destabilize entire systems?" "It's not up to me," Elena admitted. "The decision has already been made. The Coalition insists on pursuing the eclipse, and the Council doesn't have the authority to stop them. My job is to assemble a crew capable of handling whatever they might encounter." Rachel stood abruptly, pacing the room. "This is madness. You're sending people into danger without any idea of what they're facing. Do you really think they'll come back alive?" "They won't go unprepared," Elena assured her. "We've gathered intel from every available source. The eclipse's trajectory suggests it's heading toward uncharted space, a region we call the Veil. It's a place no ship has ever returned from, but if anyone can navigate it, it's Captain Marcus Kane." Rachel stopped mid-step, turning to face Elena. "Marcus Kane, he's reckless. Brilliant, yes, but reckless. If anyone's going to get himself killed, it's him. He's also the best pilot we have," Elena countered. "And he's volunteered for the mission. Alongside him will be Dr. Anna Patel, an astrophysicist specializing in anomalies, and Lieutenant Ryan Cole, a tactical expert trained for high-risk operations. They're ready to leave within the week." Rachel sank back into her chair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "Fine," she said finally. "Send your team, but make sure they understand the risks. Whatever the architects are, they're not like us. Their rules don't apply to our world." Meanwhile, far beyond the reach of sensors and telescopes, the eclipse drifted silently through the void. Inside the ship, Daniel Carter and Lavra Hayes worked tirelessly to stabilize its systems. The crystalline artifact pulsed steadily in the hidden chamber, its energy sustaining the vessel while warping the fabric of space around it. Both humans felt the strain of their journey, not just physically but mentally. The visions from the crystal lingered in their minds, haunting their waking hours and invading their dreams. "This isn't sustainable," Lavra muttered one evening as they sat together in the mess hall. Her voice was strained, her hands trembling slightly as she held a cup of lukewarm coffee. "We can't keep running forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to catch up to us." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. "I know. But until we figure out what the architects want, we don't have a choice. If we let anyone else near that artifact, it could destroy them, or worse, unleash something we can't control." Lavra stared into her cup, her thoughts drifting back to the images she'd seen. The architects had shown her wonders beyond. Imagination worlds made entirely of light, civilizations thriving without conflict, and knowledge so vast it transcended language, but they had also shown her darkness. Voids where stars had once burned brightly, civilizations reduced to ash, and a message repeated over and over, "Only the worthy may inherit eternity." What does that mean? Lavra whispered, more to herself than to Daniel. Who decides who's worthy? Us? Them? Daniel didn't answer. He didn't know. All he knew was that the architects had chosen humanity for better or worse, and it was up to them to prove they deserved the responsibility. As the days passed, the eclipse continued its journey deeper into uncharted territory. The ship's sensors picked up strange readings, gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions, and bursts of energy that defied explanation. At times, it felt as though the universe itself was unraveling around them. Yet despite the dangers, Daniel and Lavra pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. One night, as they monitored the ship's progress, a sudden jolt rocked the eclipse violently. Alarms blared throughout the corridors, and both humans scrambled to their feet. Rushing to the bridge, they found the main console displaying a new set of coordinates that hadn't been there before. "What is this?" Lavra asked, her voice tight with alarm. "Did the crystal do this?" "I think so," Daniel replied, studying the readings. "It's guiding us somewhere specific." Without hesitation, they plotted a course for the new destination. The eclipse surged forward, its engines glowing brighter than ever before. As they traveled, the visions intensified. Both humans saw flashes of a massive structure looming ahead, a construct unlike anything they had ever encountered. It radiated power, its surface shimmering with patterns that seemed to shift and change as they drew closer. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the eclipse emerged from hyperspace. Before them stretched a colossal gateway, its frame carved from material that seemed to absorb light. Beyond it lay a swirling expanse of colors and shapes, pulsing with energy. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "This is it," Daniel said softly, his voice filled with awe. "This is where the architects want us to go." Lavra gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "Are you sure about this?" "Once we cross that threshold, there's no turning back." Daniel turned to look at her, his expression resolute. "We don't have a choice. Whatever's waiting for us on the other side, it's the reason the eclipse came back. It's the reason we're here." Taking a deep breath, Lavra nodded. Together, they activated the ship's thrusters, propelling the eclipse toward the gateway. As they crossed the threshold, the universe around them dissolved into light. Time ceased to exist. Space folded in on itself. And when they emerged on the other side, they found themselves surrounded by entities unlike anything they could have imagined. These beings, the architects, were vast and incomprehensible, their forms shifting constantly between states of matter and energy. They radiated a presence that was both comforting and overwhelming, filling Daniel and Lavra with a sense of insignificance. Yet despite their immense power, they spoke gently, their voices resonating directly in their minds. "You are young," one of the architects said, "but you carry potential. Tell us, children of Earth, what will you do with eternity?" Daniel and Lavra exchanged a glance, their hearts pounding. They didn't have an answer, not yet. But as they stood before the architects, they realized the true purpose of their journey. It wasn't about proving themselves worthy. It was about learning how to become worthy. And so, under the watchful gaze of the architects, the eclipse remained, suspended in the heart of creation, its passengers beginning a new chapter in humanity's story, one that would shape the destiny of the galaxy for generations to come. The meeting between humanity and the architects was unlike anything Daniel Carter and Lavra Hayes could have imagined. The beings before them were not solid or tangible in any traditional sense. They seemed to exist as shifting forms of light and shadow, their outlines constantly changing as if they were made of both matter and energy. Their voices, though gentle, resonated deeply within Daniel and Laura's minds, bypassing language entirely and speaking directly to their thoughts. "You seek understanding," one of the architects said, its tone calm but firm. But understanding comes at a cost. Are you prepared to pay it? Daniel hesitated, glancing at Lavra. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly, but she nodded almost imperceptibly. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to the architect. We don't know what you're asking of us, he admitted. But we're here because we want to learn, to grow. The architect paused, its form shimmering like sunlight on water. Growth requires sacrifice, it replied. It demands that you confront truths about yourselves and your kind that may be difficult to accept. Lavra stepped forward, her voice steadier than she felt. What do you mean by truths? What is it you want us to see? Instead of answering, the architects extended their presence into Daniel and Laura's minds once more. This time, the visions were more vivid, more intense. They saw humanity's history unfold before them, not just the triumphs, but the failures. Wars waged over land and resources. Planets stripped bare for profit. Lives destroyed in the pursuit of power. It was overwhelming, a torrent of pain and regret that left both humans gasping for air. This is who we are? Lavra whispered, tears streaming down her face. This is what we've done? Daniel clenched his fists, struggling to process what he was seeing. Not all of us, he said, his voice shaking. There are good people, two people trying to make things better. Good intentions are not enough, another architect interjected. Its voice was colder now, carrying an edge of disappointment. You build and destroy in equal measure. You create beauty only to tear it apart. Until you learn balance, you will remain unworthy of eternity. The weight of the architect's words pressed down on Daniel and Lavra, suffocating them with guilt and shame. Yet amidst the despair, there was also clarity. They understood now why the eclipse had been chosen, not because humanity was perfect, but because it had potential. And it was up to them to prove that potential could become something greater. Back on Xylo's Prime, the Council's efforts to track the eclipse had stalled. Captain Marcus Kane and his team had set out weeks earlier, following the ship's last known trajectory. But the Vela region of space, shrouded in mystery and danger, had swallowed them whole. Communication signals faded shortly after they entered, leaving the galaxy to wonder if they had met the same fate as countless others who had ventured into the unknown. Ambassador Rachel Dawson watched the updates trickle in with growing unease. She knew the mission was risky, but she hadn't expected it to fail so quickly or so completely. Sitting alone in her quarters, she replayed the final transmission from Marcus's ship, searching for clues she might have missed. This is Captain Kane, the recording began, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. We're approaching the coordinates linked to the eclipse. Sensors are picking up massive energy readings ahead. Whatever's out there, it's big. Bigger than anything we've ever seen. Request permission to proceed. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Rachel staring at the blank screen. She replayed it again and again, each time hoping for some details she hadn't noticed before. But there was nothing, just static and silence. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Sighing, she called for the visitor to enter. It was Dr. Samuel Hargrove, a historian specializing in ancient civilizations. He carried a stack of data tablets under one arm, his expression grave. "Ambassador," he said, taking a seat across from her, "I think I've found something that might help." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Help how?" Hargrove placed the tablets on the table, tapping one to activate its display. "These records come from the oldest archives in the galaxy, the ones predating even the rise of modern civilizations. They mention beings referred to as the Shapers, according to legend. These entities were responsible for creating the universe itself and then stepping back, allowing life to evolve on its own." Rachel frowned. "You think the architects and the Shapers are the same?" "It's possible," Hargrove admitted. "The descriptions match: immense power, otherworldly forms, and a focus on guiding lesser species toward enlightenment. If the eclipse truly encountered such beings, it could explain why they chose humanity." "But why now?" Rachel asked, leaning forward. "Why reveal themselves after thousands of years of silence?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Hargrove replied. "Perhaps they believe humanity has reached a tipping point, a Moment where our choices will determine whether we thrive or self-destruct. Or maybe, he trailed off, his gaze distant. Maybe what? Rachel pressed. Maybe they're testing us, Hargrove said quietly, seeing if we're ready to take the next step. Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, Daniel and Lavra continued their dialogue with the architects. The visions had subsided, replaced by moments of quiet reflection. Both humans sat cross-legged on the floor of the chamber, their eyes closed as they absorbed everything they had seen. What happens now? Lavra asked finally, breaking the silence. Do we go back? Tell everyone what we've learned? Daniel shook his head. I don't think it works like that. The architects didn't bring us here just to deliver a message. They want us to change, to show them we can be better. Lavra nodded slowly, her mind racing. So what do? How do we prove ourselves? Before Daniel could answer, the crystalline artifact pulsed brightly, drawing their attention. Images began forming in the air around them, not memories. This time, but possibilities. They saw glimpses of Earth's future, cities powered by clean energy, nations working together instead of against each other, humanity reaching out to the stars with open arms rather than weapons. It was a vision of hope, of unity, but also of hard work and sacrifice. The choice is yours, one of the architects said, its voice echoing softly. Will you strive for this future, or will you remain bound by your past? Daniel stood, slowly his resolve hardening. We'll try, he said firmly. No promises, but we'll do everything we can to make it happen. Lavra joined him, her expression determined. We won't let you down. The architect studied them for a long moment, their forms glowing faintly. Then, without warning, the chamber filled with warmth, a sensation that spread through Daniel and Laura's bodies, filling them with strength and purpose. You carry our gift, one of the architects said. Use it wisely. With that, the visions faded and the Eclipse began to move. Its engines roared to life, propelling it away from the gateway and back toward the known regions of space. As they traveled, Daniel and Lavra felt the weight of their responsibility settling over them. They didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but they were ready to face them for humanity's sake, and for the architect's trust far beyond. The reach of sensors and telescopes, the Eclipse re-entered the galaxy, its return unnoticed by most. But for those who had waited patiently, watching the stars for signs of hope, its reappearance was a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could still prevail. The Eclipse drifted silently back into the known regions of space, its arrival unnoticed by most of the galaxy. For Daniel Carter and Lavra Hayes, however, the journey was far from over. They had returned not as explorers or survivors, but as carriers of a message, a responsibility heavier than anything they had ever imagined. The crystalline artifact still pulsed softly in the hidden chamber, its energy now intertwined with their own. They could feel it in their thoughts, guiding them gently, urging them to remember the lessons they had learned. When the Eclipse finally emerged near the edge of human-controlled territory, alarms blared across nearby outposts. Ships scrambled to intercept the mysterious vessel, their sensors picking up faint traces of energy that defied explanation. Word spread quickly, reaching Xylos Prime within hours. Ambassador Rachel Dawson received the news while attending yet another tense council meeting. Her heart skipped a beat as she listened to the report, her mind racing with possibilities. They're back, she whispered to herself, clutching the edge of the table. They're actually back. The council erupted into chaos once more, delegates shouting over each other as they debated how to respond. Some called for immediate quarantine, fearing contamination or worse. Others demanded access to the ship, convinced it held answers to questions humanity had long abandoned. Rachel raised her voice above the din, her tone firm and commanding. We don't know what happened to them, she said, her eyes scanning the room. But one thing is clear, they survived something no one else has. Whatever they bring back, we need to hear them out. Her words earned nods of agreement from some, though skepticism lingered in others' expressions. A representative from the Zardoth Empire leaned forward, his sharp features twisted into a scowl. Survived, he spat, or were altered. If the architects truly exist, then these humans may no longer be Human. Rachel clenched her jaw but kept her composure. We won't know until we speak with them. And until then, I suggest we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Hours later, a small fleet of ships approached the eclipse cautiously, their crews wary of the strange energy readings emanating from its core. When they docked and entered the airlock, they found Daniel and Lavra waiting for them, their faces calm but weary. Both humans wore simple uniforms, their appearance unchanged despite the unimaginable journey they had endured. Yet there was something different about them, something in their eyes that hinted at knowledge beyond mortal understanding. Commander Marcus Kane stepped forward, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "You're alive," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "How?" Daniel exchanged a glance with Lavra before answering. "It's a long story," he replied. "One we'll share, but not here, not yet." Kane nodded slowly, though his curiosity burned brightly. He gestured for his team to escort Daniel and Lavra back to Xylos Prime, where the council awaited. Eagerly. As they boarded the shuttle, Lavra glanced back at the eclipse one last time, her heart heavy with gratitude and sorrow. She knew the ship wouldn't remain silent forever. Its purpose was far from complete, back on Xylos Prime. The council chamber buzzed with anticipation as Daniel and Lavra were ushered inside. Every delegate leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the two humans who had vanished into the unknown and returned changed. Rachel Dawson stood beside them, her presence offering a sense of stability amidst the chaos. "Speak," a representative from the Talaran Confederacy demanded, his voice sharp. "Tell us everything." Daniel took a deep breath, steadying himself before addressing the room. "What we're about to tell you will sound impossible," he began. "But every word is true. The architects exist and they've been watching us for longer than we can imagine." Lavra picked up where he left off, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "They showed us things, truths about ourselves, about our past, and about the future we could build. But they also warned. Humanity isn't ready for eternity, not yet." The room erupted into murmurs, the delegates struggling to process what they were hearing. Rachel raised her hand, calling for silence. "Go on," she urged. "What did they show you?" Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They showed us the consequences of our actions, the wars we've waged, the planets we've destroyed, the lives we've ruined. But they also showed us what we could become if we choose differently. Clean energy, unity, exploration without greed or violence. It's possible, but only if we work together?" Lavra nodded, adding softly, "They gave us a choice. To strive for that future or to stay trapped in our old ways. We told them we'd try." A hush fell over the room as the delegates absorbed the implications. The Zarnath representative broke the silence first, his tone skeptical. "And what happens if you fail? Will they punish us? Destroy us?" "No," Daniel replied firmly. "They're not like that. They're teachers, guides. They want us to grow, but they won't force us. That's why they gave us the artifact, to remind us of what's at stake." At the mention of the artifact, the room erupted again, this time with demands to see it. Rachel stepped forward, raising her voice to restore order. "Enough," she commanded. "This isn't just a tool or a trophy. It's a gift and a test. We can't treat it lightly." Her words silenced the crowd, though tension still crackled in the air. One delegate, a soft-spoken ambassador from the Luminary Collective, spoke up hesitantly. "If what you say is true, then we have a responsibility not just to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. How do we ensure we honor their trust?" Daniel and Lavra exchanged a glance, their expressions resolute. "By starting now," Lavra said. "By working together instead of against each other. By making choices that benefit everyone, not just ourselves." Rachel nodded, her heart swelling with cautious optimism. "Then let's begin," she said, turning to address the council. "Let's prove to the architects and to ourselves that we're capable of change." In the days that followed, the galaxy watched closely as humanity took its first steps toward a new future. Under Rachel's guidance, the council established a coalition dedicated to implementing the lessons brought back by Daniel and Lavra. Scientists studied the crystalline artifact, its energy providing insights into sustainable technologies. Diplomats worked tirelessly to mend broken alliances, fostering cooperation between species that had once been enemies. Artists and philosophers drew inspiration from the visions described by the two humans. Creating works that celebrated unity and progress, for Daniel and Lavra, life became a balancing act. They traveled across the galaxy, sharing their story and encouraging others to embrace the architect's message. Yet they never forgot the weight of their responsibility or the fragility of the path ahead. The architects had given humanity a chance, but the outcome depended entirely on their choices. One evening, as they stood together on the observation deck of a newly constructed space station, Lavra turned to Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we'll succeed?" she asked quietly. "Or are we just delaying the inevitable?" Daniel smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the stars. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know this: we're trying. And maybe that's enough for now." Far beyond the reach of telescopes and sensors, the architects watched silently, their forms shimmering with quiet approval. Humanity had taken its first step toward earning eternity. Whether they would continue down that path remained to be seen, but for the first time in millennia, the architects allowed themselves a glimmer of hope. And so the eclipse drifted once more into the void, its mission fulfilled for now. It carried no crew, no destination, only the promise of return should the galaxy call upon it again. Until then, it waited patiently, a silent guardian watching over the fragile spark of potential. That was humanity.